We need somebody to disappear for 6 months and go to the Northern Territory and run a radio. But you're not allowed to tell anybody. This is the principles of clandestine organisation, really, was what was happening here. Well, I arrived in Australia in 1974. We ended up in this place in Surrey Hills, which is a bit political. And so from that I got introduced to a number of people in the Communist Party and started to get active around stuff. Now, one of the issues that was starting to arise was this really strange place called Timor-Leste. I didn't even know where it was, but got involved in the campaign for an independent East Timor. So one day I get a phone call from Joe Palmada, who was the major it turns out, organiser behind this Timor operation. And he said, "I'd like to meet you." Okay, so we arranged to meet, and when Joe rings up, you don't say no, you go. So Elkington Park in Balmain, we're down there in the sunshine, and he put this proposition to me. He said, "You're relatively unknown because you're a new comrade and so on and so forth. We need somebody to disappear for 6 months and go to the Northern Territory and run a radio. But you're not allowed to tell anybody." Okay, all right. I said, "Well, I'm going to have to go and consult with Paula, because basically the love of my life. I can't just disappear out of her life for 6 months. This is probably going to be terminal anyway, but I do it without saying." Then some hard talking done, and if I was going to the Northern Territory, she was going to take off to Europe with Adora. So that's essentially what happened. So we set up some ways of communicating with each other, and so then the task came in. Basically, okay, what I want you to do is to go down Parramatta Road and find a vehicle we can use. Okay, so I found a long wheelbase ex-Telecom Land Rover, and then another comrade apparently went and bought it. I mean, one of the things about this operation was that basically it was totally segmented, right? Left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. Only Joe Palmada and maybe Dennis Freeney, who were involved, actually held all the strings together. So apparently the vehicle got bought, and then it went off to Harry Hadfield, who was an old metal worker, a very skilled toolmaker, who put in a false petrol tank in the thing where we hid all the gear. So once it was in there and the screws were done out and a bit of mud was thrown around, you wouldn't be able to find it. You couldn't see it, it was really very, very well hidden. Then there was a period of waiting, a period of frustration where they were waiting for more money to come in and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, the operation that had previously been set up had been busted. It had not moved around enough, and so the spooks had put in the triangulation system and basically worked out where it was and knocked them off. So there was this hiatus for the communications between Fretlin and the outside world. So there was this period of waiting. So I'm sitting around in Sydney and I'm looking as if I'm lazy and indolent to all my comrade friends, just waiting for the off. So in the end, we did get the off, and so I drove this vehicle with the radio gear in it from Sydney right up to Darwin. Of course, there's floods on the way, so that held me up for about 2 weeks at, Newcastle Waters, waiting for the floods to go down, which they didn't really. So I took a few risks in terms of actually getting across the 2 kilometre causeway there after hanging around for a long period of time, and got the vehicle to Darwin and fronted around to see Brian Manning, who was the man on the spot there. He's one of the heroes of this whole period of story. So I get briefings from him and Brian Manning for the first and only time while I was up there, and he gave me the rules and regulations, more rules and operating procedure that they wanted to set up, and it was to do with don't broadcast for more than 15 minutes. As soon as you broadcast, rack off. Pack the gear up, put it back in the secret box and drive. Don't go in and out of Darwin, because there's only one track north through there. Don't go in and out of Darwin at predictable times. Sort of, go out early, come back late, so that your vehicle movements cannot be tracked against the time of the broadcast and so on and so forth. And there are only certain places where it's possible to operate from and safe to operate from. This is the wet season in the territory. Massively get bogged up there and so on and so forth. But what Brian had access to was a series of sites which you could use in the wet season, and they were largely, during the Second World War, they'd set up these airfields up in the Northern Territory. So there was hard roads in, so you wouldn't get bogged, and there was extensive runways left where the jungle hadn't quite taken over. So if you actually used the hard road in, and then used the edge of the jungle to sling your aerial, which you had to put 30 feet up into the air over a branch. So what had to happen when you got to the site, you had to sling it up in the tree, and then you had to orient this dipole aerial to get the signal directly into Timor-Leste. Now, before I went, I'd had a whole heap of instructions, basic electronics, radio techniques, and so on and so forth from this amazing guy who was our technical genius, Andrew Waterhouse. So Andrew was a technical brains. He was always learning and always. So he's the one that somebody else bought the radios, and then he crystal locked them so they're all on the one frequency that we're going to use, which improved the power of the signal. So orient the aerial, plug it all up, wait for the scheduled time, broadcast for 15 minutes and a series of codes, pack it all up and take off. So basically to defeat the direction finding and so on and so forth. A little monograph called A Few Rough Reds. What we did was to collect together stories of rank and file organising and working class struggles. And this is a bit about when I made the first contact with the people in Timor-Leste. And I'm ready to broadcast here, and it's been really hard to get there because it's been wet and I'm running a bit late and I'm sweating and I'm trying to, sweating underneath the raincoat, and then the raincoat's getting wet as well, and I'm trying to set the gear up, and it's all a bit of a nightmare trying to get the rope over the tree and set it all up and all that sort of stuff. So I'm ready to go here. So I've switched the radio on. Amazing. Through the crashing storm static, I could hear the tinny strains of Foho Ramalau. This was it. Somehow from somewhere, they were still broadcasting. Viva Fredolin, viva Puavo Maubere. Alarico Fernandez started his news bulletin. Deep breaths as I nervously caressed the microphone switch and waited to break in. He finished the first item. I hit the microphone button and the needle indicating signal strength soared strongly as I croaked out in as calm a voice as I could muster. This is Colaberi. This is Colaberi, calling Alarico Fernandez and Fredolin. This is Colaberi in Australia. Can you hear me? Over. No response. Alarico had continued with the next news item. I tried again, and this time he stopped reading the bulletin. A short silence. He had heard something. Who was it? I hit the airwaves again, and this time a response. Hello, Colaberi. Hello, Colaberi. This is Alarico Fernandez. I am receiving you. I pulled out the rapidly smudging paper with the frequencies and radio schedules. They would need to listen at 10:30 a.m. on any of 3 days, and I would do the same on the other 3. Were these schedules okay? He extravagantly confirmed the schedules and then read him urgent messages from Jose Ramos Horta and Dennis Franey. Very quickly, secure transmission time was up and it was all over. The gear was back in the dummy petrol tank and I was out of there, singing in the rain, about to put 50 plus miles between the radio and the transmission site. I tried to concentrate on the driving, but it was hard to stop grinning to myself. It had worked first time, and I knew they wouldn't catch me this time. What a blast. Well, it was 3 days. 3 days listening, and then 3 days when I would possibly transmit. Okay. Didn't always transmit. Used to mix it up, and so on and so forth. So they'd listen and they might not hear anything. I'd listen and I might not hear anything. So we just kept it as random as possible, and so on and so forth. Yes, I was there for 6 months, but then what happened was that I was relieved. And another comrade came up, John Wishart, and then he was followed by another one, who was then followed by another. So about 3.5 years we kept this up. Long time. Until, in fact, we worked out that the radio at their end had been compromised. And that either Alarico Fernandez, who I talked to on the radio, had either been captured and was actually broadcasting under duress, or had shifted sides. So basically, Cosmos, who's no longer with us, basically agreed to stay on and running the radio for more than these 6 months while we worked this stuff out. I didn't know any of this stuff because, once I came back to Sydney, that's it. I didn't get to hear about the operation anymore. That's it. Need to know principle. Secrecy, right? Yeah. And so Cosmos actually was able to give Alarico Fernandez the blast on the phone, and we closed down. But we continued to listen. And we listened for another 2 years, I think. It's the proudest period of my life, having done that stuff. We kept silent about it for 25 years, said nothing. And it wasn't until such time as the people got independence, after the Indonesians were forced out or left, and then there was that dreadful period of troubles and so on and so forth, that we felt that we could actually publish this stuff. So it remained secret because it was a clandestine operation. Yeah. So we all went back there. And we were welcomed as heroes of the Timorese Revolution. In the few rough reds, there's a picture in the front of a number of the people that were involved in the operation. So we got, here we got John Wishart, Brian Manning, Chris Elenor, Dave Arkin. There's Brian Manning, who ran a separate operation, which was the public radio, pretty much, but it was, the secret controller of the clandestine one. And these three others. We all went back there in 2000 for the first Frettling Congress. Basically in this baseball hall, which is partly bombed out or damaged. It's this upsurge of national pride and, here's the leadership of Frettling out the front, the Central Committee and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So how do I feel about it? I feel really very, very positive.